I'm not joking when I say this change will be huge for the next version of Space Engineers. Look at the images on screen right now. This is an early engine test of a ship crashing on a planet. Yes, it's kind of rough, but you can see how different it is compared to what we currently experience as Space Engineers. Usually, when you crash in the game, you come to a complete stop and ready to slide along a floor through voxels. The new game engine in development is changing how ships crash. As shown by Keen's software house developer Chendo, you can see how the ship would crash in VRAGE 3. VRAGE, or Volumetric Rage, is an in-house game engine developed by Keen's software house. The current active iteration of a new game engine is VRAGE 2.0, which powers both Space Engineers and Medieval Engineers. The previous version, 1.0, powered Keen's first game, Mind Wars 2081. However, we're now aware that development on VRAGE 3 has officially begun. Earlier in November, Jan, aka Chendo, shared via Twitter that he and his team began work on VRAGE 3. We do know it has been in work for a lot longer than this, so keep that in mind with some of the features we're talking about today. Many questions spring to mind with this update, or rather I should call it a development feature. For example, is it possible for the weight of a crashing object, like a starship, to play a factor in the crash landing environment? Chendo says yes. The team are taking material into account in VRAGE 3. Therefore, for the example we've seen today is sand, whereas another example test performed could be rock. Something that looks like many of you is that Chendo is planning all sorts of interactions in crashing mechanics, precisely all sorts of water interactions as well. When we say materials, if your ship's made out of maybe light metal, then it's going to crash differently to say a big giant dreadnought made out of the heaviest armor you could imagine. Now therefore, you can imagine your ship coming down and crashing into a lake or ocean, as we just mentioned water. In my previous video on the game engine updates, we've spoken about water on the new VRAGE 3 game engine that Keen is working on. Keen and the development team expect that water will become a major part of available gameplay features in future games. Keep that in mind, we'll come back to it later. Specifically, volumetric water is required to be simulated with all possible natural phenomenon on a planetary scale, therefore creating flows like rivers and waterfalls while still being interactive and allowing players to interact with and manipulate it fully. I should point out that the water you see on game right now that I'm showing you is from a mod in Space Engineers, but if you imagine how it currently works and then apply it to how we might see it in a future game, you kind of see where we're going. Currently, Keen is just experimenting with such features like crashing in water. Another fellow Space Engineers creator, Splitsy, raised a good question. He asked if the new VRAGE 3 engine would allow for voxel displacement rather than just removing voxels with ship impacts. You might be confused by what this means, allow me to explain. When a ship currently crashes in Space Engineers, voxels such as dirt and earth are removed from the game. What Splitsy is asking is whether these voxels could be pushed elsewhere by the weight of the object crashing, the mass essentially. If so, this is called raised edges to a crater. Think about it when we see ships buried in sand or snow, or those typical sci-fi crash landings. You get dirt all over the front of the starship and various stuff like that. They leave a trail behind them. Well, currently Chendo's tests are showing the ship is leaving a trail in the voxels, but whether it's displacing any of the voxels is unknown. Another exciting detail is Chendo showing that resources, including water, will be dropped from destroyed blocks. However, the big change here is all blocks could be fractured. So when we watch an episode of sci-fi shows and we see the ship's hull get shaved off, maybe a wing, you can achieve that in VRAGE 3 in an upcoming game. When we crash in Space Engineers, we can rip blocks apart or off of each other. However, we can't actually damage the single block. Think of a cube block. You could cut it in half by crashing down on a planet or into an asteroid. That's a pretty cool feature if you ask me. Something this team have been working on is the rendering of shadows in-game, again building onto the graphics design updates. The team stabilized shadows by subtracting a position of a pivot object, such as a fighter cockpit, from a shadow origin. Examples of this are on screen right now so you can kind of make head or tail of what they're doing. You can see how sun movement shadows are better and still in development compared to VRAGE 2. We can see the originals are a bit more rough cut and have sharp edges. Next time you're in Space Engineers, take a look at this, you'll see what they mean. Along with testing crashing in VRAGE 3, Chendo and his team have been testing Armour Deformation. Basically, when armor blocks get hit, they deform. Versions of this gameplay feature are already inside Space Engineers. However, VRAGE 3 looks to expand on this using lodding and bones-in grids. But what are the differences to the current version in Space Engineers? Chendo explains that the new version will include a pipeline to create the armors, meaning it's fully moddable. Additionally, on top of loading improvements, the system is written on top of the new render, which is DX12, and uses the GPU-driven pipeline. I'll speak more about that in just a second for those unaware of GPU upgrades to VRAGE 3. You might be asking, what are the significant differences between each new game engine, or rather each game engine? One of the biggest differences between 2.0 and 3.0 is the GPU-driven pipeline like I just mentioned. This will allow the GPU to feed itself with draw cells, freeing up the CPU significantly. An example of Space Engineers uses 3 cores dedicated to rendering on a CPU. Building on graphics, the engine will adopt new APIs such as DirectX 12, modern physics via Havok 2022, and audio from Fmod Studio. Oh, also dynamic global illumination using ray tracing. A key detail to note about this game engine is it's going to have the multi-platform approach from the start. Keep that in mind. Therefore, every decision the development team makes, they are considering other platforms. An example is like Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch if we really want to go that far. Don't hold your hopes up. It's no secret that Space Engineers on Xbox was never the idea from the get-go. However, it's good to see that if something like this is to happen again, then the game engine can support it. Also, deeper modding possibilities are being worked on. This would allow modders to combine mods, make materials, and use a straightforward API. Interesting. Before you get carried away, it's evident that VRAGE 3 is in early development and has a long way to go. The main question you might all have is, Jack, does this mean another game is coming? I'm going to answer this the same way I did last time, like a bullish politician. Yes and no. No, I don't think there's anything properly being worked on right now, not of the engine so early in development like this. Yes, I would not be surprised if something was being conceived or planned. If Keen are working on another game, it is likely in the concept design phase. Chendo and his team are testing all these features they're developing. This is like an experimental phase for the development team. They're working on new features which could make it into the next iteration of Space Engineers. No, I'm not saying the next game is Space Engineers 2, I have no clue. And some of you seem to be against the idea of calling it a sequel game as well, so yeah. If Keen decides to call it that, then it also sets a base mark and benchmark for the next game and what it needs to live up to. However, I think it's clear now we're seeing several cool features designed for VRAGE 3. When I think of another game in the same vein as Space Engineers, I begin to imagine something fantastic. I'll discuss this in more detail as we approach 2023 and beyond. However, the idea of aerodynamic features, perhaps fully volumetric water, and even complex dynamic weather systems sounds fantastic. Imagine piloting your ship through a lightning storm on a planet, or hiding it underwater or perhaps behind a waterfall. All these features could be available in VRAGE 3. An important detail to remember is when we ask, are they working on a new game? Currently, Chendo's team are working on the engine, not the game. They are developing the game engine. You can't build an entire car without at least making the engine first. It's kind of one of the core things to make the actual car work. Think of it like that. I know it's a weird analogy, but hopefully you get what I mean. Development on VRAGE 3 must continue before we get anywhere to designing a game. Hence why I think they may be in the concept design phase and we're designing what they want this future thing to look like. But again, there is no official confirmation on anything future in work at Keen, but I think if you put 2 and 2 together, they are obviously working on something else. No, VRAGE 3 is not porting to Space Engineers. Don't even ask that again. Alright everyone, I've been Captain Jack, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.